There comes a moment when you begin to see patterns where others see accidents. Certain people leave your life with strange timing. Certain dreams return before something changes. Certain words, numbers, memories, and coincidences start appearing with a quiet insistence, as if reality itself is trying to get your attention. And for a while, it feels like awakening. It feels like you've finally understood what was hidden from you. But there is an ancient warning almost no one wants to hear. The first light you see may not be freedom. Sometimes the mind touches mystery and immediately turns it into identity. Sometimes the veil opens just enough for the ego to walk through wearing sacred clothing. And the most dangerous illusion is not being asleep. It is believing you can no longer be deceived. The first trap does not look like a trap. It often begins as relief. After years of confusion, searching, pain, repeated endings, and strange inner pressure, something finally seems to open. You begin to understand why certain people hurt you, why certain patterns kept repeating, why your old life started to feel too small. You look back and think, "Now I see it." And that sentence, innocent as it sounds, can become the doorway into the first illusion. Because the mind loves arrival more than transformation. It wants a place to stand, a name for what is happening, a story that makes the chaos feel organized. So when the first layer of reality becomes visible, the ego quietly claims it as a possession. It says, "I understand now. I'm not like I was before. I'm not like the others." And just like that, awakening stops being a movement. It becomes a throne. This is why false awakening often begins not with blindness, but with premature certainty. The person has seen something real, but they mistake the first glimpse for the whole sky. They notice synchronicities, emotional patterns, repeated numbers, strange timing, hidden motives, energetic shifts. And because these things feel meaningful, they begin to believe every interpretation they make is also meaningful. But seeing a sign is not the same as understanding it. And noticing the veil is not the same as passing through it. You may have felt this in yourself, even quietly. That moment when you realize someone's behavior was not love, but control. That moment when an old dream, relationship, or ambition suddenly lost its power over you. That moment when you could no longer pretend your life was ordinary, because too many invisible threads had begun to connect. And yet, right there, something subtle can happen. The discovery that should humble you can start to make you feel chosen by your own insight. The ancient warning is simple, but uncomfortable. The ego can survive almost anything, even awakening. It can wear symbols, quote profound ideas, speak about energy, consciousness, shadow, illusion, and destiny. It can sound wise while remaining untouched in the places where it is still afraid. It can speak of surrender while secretly wanting control. It can speak of truth while avoiding the truth that would actually change it. And this is where many people confuse spiritual language with inner transformation. Real awakening does not rush to declare itself finished. It does not need to announce that it has arrived. It becomes suspicious of its own certainty, not because it is weak, but because it knows how easily the mind can turn light into decoration. The more honest a person becomes, the less interested they are in appearing awake. They begin to ask a more dangerous question, not, "What have I discovered?" but "What part of me is using this discovery to feel safe?" And once that question appears, another hidden mechanism begins to reveal itself. Because the ego, when exposed, does not disappear. It learns new words. The ego is not always loud. Sometimes it does not enter the room demanding attention. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, speaks softly, uses beautiful language, and convinces everyone, including you, that it has become wisdom. This is one of its oldest disguises. When ordinary pride no longer feels acceptable, it evolves. It stops saying, "I am better than you," and begins saying, "I am more conscious than you." This shift is so subtle that many people never notice it happening. A person who once wanted to be admired for success may now want to be admired for depth. A person who once wanted to be seen as intelligent may now want to be seen as awakened. A person who once judged others for being weak may now judge them for being asleep. The costume changes, but the hunger underneath remains the same. And this is the part that hurts to see, because it often hides inside our most beautiful ideas. You can recognize it by the feeling it creates. There is a strange satisfaction in believing you see what others cannot. There is a secret pleasure in watching people chase old goals while you tell yourself you have moved beyond them. There is a quiet superiority in thinking your pain made you deeper, your isolation made you different, your awareness made you untouchable. And for a while, it feels like clarity. But sometimes what we call clarity is just separation with better vocabulary. The ego learns sacred words because sacred words protect it from being questioned. If it says, "I'm hurt," it can be challenged. If it says, "Your energy is not aligned with mine," it sounds elevated. If it says, "I'm afraid of being rejected," it becomes vulnerable. If it says, "I no longer resonate with lower frequencies," it avoids the wound completely. And slowly, language that was meant to reveal truth becomes a curtain hiding fear. This does not mean every intuitive feeling is false. It does not mean every boundary is arrogance. It does not mean every sense of distance from old people, old habits, and old environments is ego. Sometimes you really are changing. Sometimes your body truly knows what your mind is still trying to explain. But the question is not whether your words sound conscious. The question is whether they bring you closer to honesty or further away from it. Because the ego can speak about unity while secretly needing enemies. It can speak about love while refusing to forgive. It can speak about detachment while being addicted to being seen as detached. It can speak about truth while choosing only the truths that flatter its new identity. And when sacred language becomes armor, the soul does not expand. It becomes trapped inside a more elegant prison. That is why the next danger is even more seductive, because once the ego learns sacred words, it begins to collect sacred secrets. Once the ego learns sacred words, it begins searching for sacred things to possess. Not because the soul is curious, but because the self-image is hungry. It wants hidden books, forbidden symbols, ancient codes, lost teachings, secret maps, suppressed truths, and mysteries no one else seems brave enough to face. And at first, this search feels noble. It feels like you are finally escaping the shallow surface of life. It feels like the world has layers, and you have been invited beneath them. But there is a quiet danger in hidden knowledge. Not because the knowledge itself is dangerous, but because of what the mind can do with it. A truth that was meant to dissolve illusion can become the center of a new identity. Instead of softening the heart, it hardens the sense of being different. Instead of making a person more honest, it makes them more certain. And certainty, when it is fed by mystery, can become almost impossible to question. You may have seen this happen in small ways. Someone discovers a symbol, a theory, a tradition, a pattern in history, a hidden structure behind events. Suddenly, everything becomes proof. Every conversation confirms what they already believe. Every coincidence becomes a message about their special perception. Every doubt from others becomes evidence that others are blind. And without realizing it, the search for truth becomes a mirror that only reflects the seeker's own importance. The ancient teachings were never meant to make a person feel special. They were meant to make the false self less solid. They were meant to make you more awake in your ordinary life, in the way you speak, listen, forgive, wait, love, and suffer. Because what is the value of knowing secret laws of the universe if you still cannot face your own jealousy? What is the value of reading hidden wisdom if a single criticism can destroy your peace? What is the value of seeing patterns everywhere if you cannot see the pattern repeating inside you? This is where many people quietly stop growing. They collect mysteries the way others collect achievements. They know names, systems, prophecies, energies, ancient civilizations, hidden forces, symbolic meanings. But their relationships remain full of the same defenses. Their silence is not peace, but withdrawal. Their detachment is not freedom, but fear wearing a calm face. And still, the hunger continues, because secret knowledge can be deeply comforting. It gives pain a structure. It gives loneliness a mythology. It gives confusion a hidden architecture. It lets a person feel chosen without requiring them to be changed. But real truth does not only fascinate you, it interrupts you. It does not only make you look at the world differently, it makes you unable to lie to yourself in the same old way. And this is why every hidden path eventually leads to a mirror. The mirror test begins when knowledge stops being impressive and starts becoming personal. It is the moment when the question changes from, "What is hidden in the world?" to "What am I still hiding from myself?" And this is where many people become uncomfortable, because the outer mystery can be thrilling, but the inner one can be humiliating. It is easier to speak about illusions in society than to admit the illusions inside your own reactions. It is easier to name the darkness outside than to sit with the wound that keeps searching for it. The mirror does not flatter the awakened image. It exposes the unfinished human being beneath it. This test often arrives through ordinary life. A relationship triggers something you thought you had healed. A small rejection brings back a pain you believed you had transcended. A delay, a silence, a criticism, or a misunderstanding suddenly reveals how much control you still want. And you realize that the old self is not gone. It has only become quieter, more subtle, more skilled at hiding behind explanations. That recognition can feel disappointing, but it is also the beginning of something real. False awakening avoids this moment by spiritualizing the wound. Instead of saying, "I felt abandoned," it says, "Their energy shifted." Instead of saying, "I wanted to be chosen," it says, "They were not aligned with my path." Instead of saying, "I am afraid of being ordinary," it says, "I was never meant for normal people." The words may sound refined, but the hidden pain remains untouched. And whatever remains untouched does not disappear. It starts directing the story from behind the curtain. The shadow is not only the ugly part of you. Sometimes it is the frightened part, the needy part, the jealous part, the part that still wants applause, rescue, revenge, certainty, control, or superiority. It is the part that says it wants truth, but only if truth does not embarrass it. It is the part that wants awakening without vulnerability. And yet consciousness only expands where self-deception ends. You cannot awaken beyond the truth you refuse to face. This is why the mirror test is not about shame. It is about honesty without performance. It is the quiet courage to notice when your peace depends on being admired, to notice when your intuition is mixed with fear, to notice when your boundaries are protecting your dignity and when they are protecting your pride, to notice when your silence is wisdom and when it is punishment. And once you begin to see this, the path becomes much less theatrical. You stop asking only whether the world is deceiving you. You begin asking whether your own fear is editing what you see. Because a person can know many truths and still be ruled by an unseen wound. They can speak of light and still carry an unexamined darkness into every room. And if that darkness is not faced inwardly, it will soon be found everywhere outside. Once the mirror is avoided, the world begins to carry what the self refuses to hold. This is one of the most delicate warnings on the path. A person begins to notice manipulation, hidden motives, corruption, deception, systems of control, invisible pressures moving through people and institutions. And some of what they see may be real. The world does contain shadows. People do hide things. Power does disguise itself. But the danger begins when discernment becomes obsession. At first, it feels like perception. You notice what others ignore. You sense when something is off in a room. You feel the strange heaviness behind certain smiles, certain conversations, certain places. You begin to understand that not everything presented as truth is true. And this can be necessary, because innocence without discernment can become another form of sleep. But fear is clever. It does not always arrive trembling. Sometimes it arrives as certainty. Sometimes it whispers, You are the only one who sees what is really happening. And from that moment, every disagreement becomes programming, every mistake becomes an attack, every silence becomes proof of hidden intention. The person thinks they are reading reality, but they may be reading their own nervous system projected onto reality. This is how false awakening turns the world into a battlefield. The eyes become sharp, but the heart becomes closed. Every stranger becomes suspicious. Every institution becomes evil. Every ordinary event becomes coded with threat. The person no longer experiences mystery as wonder, but as danger. They do not feel expanded by awareness. They feel surrounded, and because they call this vigilance, they may never recognize it as fear. You may have felt a smaller version of this after betrayal, disappointment, or sudden loss. After someone deceives you, the mind starts searching for signs you missed. It replays old conversations. It studies tones, pauses, coincidences, patterns. It promises that if you can detect the darkness early enough next time, you will never be hurt again. But protection can quietly become imprisonment when every door starts to look like a trap. The hidden truth is that not every shadow outside you is yours, but every shadow you obsess over begins to shape you. What you stare at long enough enters your inner climate. Real discernment does not need panic to stay awake. It can see darkness without worshipping it, sense danger without becoming addicted to it, recognize deception without losing tenderness. And this is where the next threshold appears, because seeing clearly is not the same as being free. Freedom asks for something far more difficult than perception. It asks you to give something up. There is a point on the path where knowledge stops being enough. Not because knowledge is useless, but because it can only take you to the doorway. At the doorway, something else is required. Not a new theory, not a new symbol, not another hidden explanation for why your life feels strange. Something must be surrendered. And this is the part many people secretly hoped awakening would not ask of them. The ancient idea of sacrifice has often been misunderstood. It is not about punishment. It is not about suffering to prove you are worthy. It is not about becoming cold, empty, or removed from ordinary life. The real sacrifice is more intimate than that. It is the giving up of the version of yourself that cannot enter the next room. Sometimes this version of you is built from pain. It is the identity of the misunderstood one, the betrayed one, the chosen outsider, the one who sees too much, the one nobody truly recognizes. And because that identity was born from real wounds, it can feel sacred. It can feel like your protection, your story, your proof that your suffering meant something. But there comes a moment when the same identity that helped you survive begins to prevent you from becoming whole. This is why many people stop at the edge of transformation. They want revelation, but not the collapse of the self-image that revelation requires. They want signs, dreams, synchronicities, confirmations, and a sense that destiny is guiding them. But when destiny asks them to release the addiction, the resentment, the fantasy, the role, the relationship, the old hunger for validation, they hesitate. Because real awakening does not only show you meaning. It asks whether you are willing to be changed by what you have seen. You can recognize this initiation by the strange resistance it brings. You know what needs to end, but you keep explaining why it cannot. You feel what is no longer true, but you keep performing it because others still expect it from you. You sense that a chapter has closed, but you remain near the door, touching the handle, afraid of silence on the other side. And beneath all the confusion, there is often one simple fear. Who will I be without the identity I have been defending for so long? No one can fake this passage. You can fake calmness. You can fake wisdom. You can fake detachment. You can build an entire image around being transformed. But you cannot fake the quiet death of a false self. You cannot fake the moment when the old reward no longer tastes the same, when applause feels empty, when proving yourself becomes exhausting. And if that surrender does not happen inwardly, the ego will find a stage where it can perform awakening for the world. After the surrender is refused, something very subtle begins to form around the person. Not a wall that others can see, not a prison made of obvious pride or arrogance. Something softer, more elegant, more convincing. The person begins to perform the version of themselves they believe awakening should produce. They become careful with their words, careful with their image, careful with how conscious they appear. This performance can look beautiful from the outside. They speak calmly, even when anger is still burning underneath. They quote ancient teachings, even when their own heart is still closed. They post profound phrases about silence, detachment, energy, and truth, while secretly checking who noticed. They seem above drama, but inside they are still negotiating with the old hunger to be seen. And because the performance looks peaceful, even they may mistake it for peace. There is a strange loneliness inside this kind of false awakening. The person cannot be ordinary anymore, because ordinary feels like falling from the image they have created. They cannot admit confusion easily, because confusion would disturb the identity of being awake. They cannot say, "I don't know," because the role they are playing depends on mysterious certainty. So they become trapped inside their own symbolism. Not because they are fake, but because they are afraid to be seen without the costume. You may recognize this in moments when you felt pressure to be above what still hurt you. You wanted to appear healed before you were. You wanted to seem detached while still waiting for a message, an apology, a sign, a confirmation. You wanted to sound wise when what you really needed was to be honest. And maybe you judged yourself for still feeling human after everything you had understood. But the wound does not disappear because the language becomes more refined. The hidden truth is that appearing conscious can become another form of unconsciousness. When a person is performing awakening, they are no longer listening to life. They are managing an image. They begin to ask, "How does this make me look?" instead of, "What is this revealing in me?" And this is how even the search for truth can become a stage. The soul wants freedom, but the ego wants witnesses. Real inner freedom has very little interest in being impressive. It does not need to prove its depth. It can be quiet without making silence a performance. It can be kind without needing to appear pure. It can admit fear, sadness, jealousy, confusion, and tenderness without feeling spiritually defeated. And when the performance begins to fall away, something unexpected appears beneath it, a silence that does not need to announce itself. The silence after the veil falls is not always dramatic. It may not arrive with visions, thunder, cosmic certainty, or a sudden feeling that you have mastered reality. Sometimes it comes as a strange exhaustion with pretending, a quiet refusal to keep explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, a softening of the need to be right in every conversation, a deep inner feeling that the old games no longer deserve your life. This is where many people misunderstand true awakening. They expect it to feel like power. They imagine it as intensity, special knowledge, heightened perception, constant signs, and a sense of being chosen by the universe. But often, the deeper movement is much humbler. You simply lose interest in feeding what once consumed you. The drama that used to pull you in now feels strangely distant, like a language your soul no longer speaks fluently. You may notice it in ordinary moments. Someone tries to provoke you, and for the first time, you do not feel the same need to respond. A memory returns, but it no longer owns your entire body. A coincidence happens, and instead of rushing to interpret it, you simply become still. An old desire appears, and you realize it was never love, but a request to be validated. These are not small things. These are signs that something inside you is no longer ruled by the same hunger. The hidden truth is that real awakening often feels less like becoming extraordinary, and more like becoming sincere, less like rising above humanity, and more like returning to it without the old armor. You begin to see that depth is not proven by how mysterious you sound. It is revealed in how honestly you live when no one is watching, how gently you hold what you used to hide, how little you need to turn every experience into evidence of your importance. There is a paradox here that the false awakened self finds difficult to accept. The more real the transformation becomes, the less it needs to decorate itself. The person who is truly changing may not look more mystical. They may simply become less reactive, less performative, less hungry for domination, less attached to being misunderstood. They stop trying to turn their pain into a crown. They begin allowing life to be sacred without needing themselves to be the center of the revelation. And yet, even here, the warning is not over. Because the mind can turn even humility into identity. It can become proud of being simple, proud of being silent, proud of no longer needing attention. It can hide in the language of surrender just as easily as it once hid in the language of power. And this is why the final trap is the most difficult to see. It does not come dressed as darkness. It comes dressed as light. The final trap is rarely ugly. That is why it survives so long. If it arrived as cruelty, greed, hatred, or obvious deception, you would recognize it more easily. But the deepest illusion often appears radiant, meaningful, elevated, almost sacred. It comes after you have already left behind certain old blindnesses. And because you have escaped one prison, you may not notice the new one forming around your light. This is the warning, hidden in many ancient paths. The person wakes from ordinary sleep, sees through material illusions, feels the strange intelligence moving beneath life, and begins to sense that existence is not random. They understand that dreams can speak, coincidences can carry weight, pain can initiate, and endings can be invitations. All of this may be true. But then the ego whispers something almost invisible. Now you are beyond deception. And the moment you believe that, deception has already entered through the brightest door. Because the ego does not mind losing old identities if it can claim a higher one. It can release the mask of success and put on the mask of wisdom. It can lose interest in being admired by the crowd and become addicted to being recognized by the few. It can stop chasing ordinary status and begin chasing spiritual status. And this is where the soul becomes trapped in a golden cage. Not trapped by ignorance, but by the belief that it has become too enlightened to be fooled. You may recognize the feeling in a quieter form. That subtle tightening when someone questions your interpretation. That inner resistance when life does not confirm the story you built around your awakening. That discomfort when someone you consider less aware reveals something about you that is painfully true. That strange need to protect the image of your own depth. These moments are not failures. They are doorways. But only if you do not turn away. The last trap looks like light because it uses everything beautiful as material. It uses intuition, silence, symbols, synchronicity, ancient wisdom, dreams, healing, destiny, and even humility. It says, "You are safe now. You have arrived." You see clearly. But true awakening never gives the ego a permanent throne. It keeps returning you to honesty. It keeps asking what part of you still wants to own the mystery, instead of being changed by it. And perhaps this is the deepest realization of all. The path does not end when the eyes open, because even light can become a cage when the ego claims it. The warning is not meant to make you distrust your awakening. It is meant to make you protect it from becoming another identity. The real question is not whether you have seen something others have missed. The real question is whether what you have seen has made you more truthful, more human, more free. Maybe this is why this warning feels so personal. Because somewhere inside, you already knew that awakening is not proven by how much you know, how many signs you notice, how many hidden patterns you can explain, or how different you feel from the people around you. The real sign is quieter. It appears when you can look at yourself without protecting the image you created, when you stop using mystery to escape honesty, when you no longer need your pain to make you special, or your insight to make you untouchable. True awakening does not make you less human. It brings you closer to what is real inside you, closer to your wounds without shame, closer to your intuition without fear, closer to the mystery without needing to control it. So if this message reached you at a strange moment, do not rush to name it. Just notice what moved in you while you listened. Notice the sentence that stayed with you, the discomfort, the recognition, the quiet relief. Sometimes truth does not arrive to impress the mind. It arrives to loosen the old self from within. If this video spoke to something you have been feeling but could not explain, subscribe and stay close to this path. Like the video if it helped you recognize a pattern you were already living, and write one word in the comments. Veil. Not to prove anything, but to mark the moment you understood that even light must be held with humility, because your life is not random, but the greatest pattern may be the one bringing you back to truth, again and again.